maybe.
Uh, what's happening in 2025 in the health tech world a little bit, kind of a summary, quick and dirty. And then we're going to spend a few minutes, this is a quick 30-minute show, conversation talking about where we see 2026 going. Before we jump in with your long list of things, I'll give a kind of a high level assessment of what I thought 2025 was. And I think it was, first of all, it was all things AI, right? I mean, it was like, if there's anything else that was happening in health tech, it was absolutely secondary to what's going on in AI. And AI, and it's almost like if you're doing anything in health tech at all, and you don't have an AI component to it, you're almost dismissed. And what?
Or are you?
What?
We'll talk
All
about
right.
that
Well,
later.
all
I
right.
said, or
Now,
are you? Well,
this is not
we'll talk
rehearsed.
about that.
So my take on 2025 is it was the year when people started to experiment with it. I mean, in a serious way, and start to introduce things in a serious way. And it was a little more than a year ago the ChatGPT really came to the forefront and became like, oh, it's actually a real thing. And then Anthropic and Perplexity right on the tails of that. And now you're starting to see it in a lot of things are in an introductory sense are kind of coming into these applications. You're starting to see it in some at least limited way. This is the Cambrian explosion of new innovation in a space. And the one thing I was talking to someone about this the other day, I'm old enough to have seen a lot of these things scale up. Fax machines. A lot of people on this call probably don't even know what a fax machine is, but fax machines and cell phones and the internet and the ramp up, the hockey stick ramp up in each of those was quite impressive in its own right. But with AI, man, the hockey stick, the acceleration of adoption and use is like nothing else I've ever seen in terms of what's happened. And I think it's only going to get more. It's going to continue to accelerate, and it's going to be more pervasive. I know this is not particularly earth-shattering prediction, but
Do you think, let me ask you, is it, in your experience, is it accelerating
oh, for
faster than
sure.
IoT?
Yeah, it's not even close. Yeah, this is
Wow. Okay.
it went from basically being nowhere in 2024 to in to now it's just everywhere. And it's nuts. And at the same time, remember we had Therese on a few weeks ago, and there was AI that was going on, but her Curie DX was image processing, and that kind of AI had been around for a while, and you've seen that, but it didn't have the kind of acceleration that you're seeing with the large language models and the stuff that OpenAI and these and Anthropic and et cetera are doing. So I think this is a whole different kind of adoption. But at the same time, I think we're in for some interesting days ahead, and we'll talk more about that. So what do you have on your list? What's on your list for 2025?
So, by the way, everybody, I'm Larry Trotter. I'm the founder of Inherence Security. So as far as 2025 is concerned, what I saw, well, we can start off with regulations. A lot of people don't know this, but states actually brought bills to the table to regulate AI in terms of governance. Some bills were passed. Some bills are still in the holding period. I think that's really something people are going to need to be on the lookout. I'll talk about a little bit more about that later, about the 2026 predictions. What else? You're right. I mean, AI has accelerated. I wouldn't say it's been adopted per se. It has been adopted, don't get me wrong, but at a mass level, I think a lot of hospitals or providers are rushing into it to adopt. But I feel like they're moving, from what I've heard, they're being more smart about it. They're really assessing their readiness for it, really building use cases. I've seen a lot of that, which is a great indicator. I think that was completely ignored with IoT and traditional IT systems. What else have we seen? We've heard some conversations about the business to consumer market and enforcing HIPAA regulations from that perspective. Right now, in terms of consumers, it's really from a security privacy perspective, it's controlled by the FDA. So that's going to be interesting coming in 2026. And we've seen the current administration wants to really deregulate AI. So how is that going to affect innovation? How is that going to affect security? I think those are all things we're going to be on the lookout for in 2026. And of course, everybody knows that the feds are trying to really put this blanket over all states and create a standardization and take the power away from the states. I don't really think that's going to last, but I'll talk about that more about that in 2026 predictions. But yeah, 2025, like you said, man, I think AI is, the front runner. It's everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. And yeah, we're going to roll right into 2026. And I think we're going to see some interesting things. Do you want to start with
Well,
your predictions for 2026?
well, there's a general kind of area of interest for me, and that is like what's going to happen to people in 2026, and what's going to happen to jobs and the future for people in the health tech world in 2026 and thereafter. How fundamental is the change going to be? How devastating? How disruptive? And I have some thoughts about that in a kind of a macro sense, and what's our response supposed to be in that world, like how do you prepare yourself for that? And we can chat about that a little bit. In terms of where things are going from a prediction standpoint, I think you're going to start to see some consolidation amongst some of the players in the space. I think
Agreed.
tech,
Agreed.
you said hospitals and health systems, and I would include payers in this, tend to be very cautious in terms of their adoption. And then I think you said that, right? That's
Hmm.
inherent in this industry.
Right.
They don't do healthcare is not typically an industry that adopts things with any speed. And so it's completely predictable to me that they're kind of being cautious about it. But at this one of the pressures that I think that's on health systems and hospitals in particular is costs. That their revenue is really in jeopardy in a lot of ways. I mean, this big beautiful bill is gonna hammer, I think, a lot of hospitals, especially rural hospitals, and I think you're going to start to see them really struggle with survival. And I think AI is going to be an enticement that they can't afford to ignore, because it's going to allow them to reduce their uh, a lot of their operations costs. Is probably from a revenue cycle management. It's going to help them. And I'm working with a rev cycle management company right now, and the AI is really going to help them uh, uh, with revenue as these payers crank down on pre-auths and denials and so forth, and other kind of mechanisms
Right.
to
Right.
kind of prop up their own revenues. I think so. I think they're inevitably going to have to start to adopt in some areas. Probably not. They'll be cautious on the clinical and care delivery side, because they have to be, but there are going to be real opportunities on the operation side to consolidate and reduce costs. And it will be, I mean, they'll have to do it basically out of necessity.
So there's so many points I want to touch on. Right, taking jobs, human in the loop, right?
For sure.
Jobs will be taken. I'm not going to say they're not. They are. Just like when the internet boom came around, business transformed in a different type of way. Many businesses went online. Some were still
Yeah.
brick and mortar, but it completely
Yeah.
changed how businesses are run. And I mean, I always like to use the example like McDonald's, right? That's the simplest examples. They have, I live in the city, so and you're close, Brendan. So they have the kiosk where they don't have people, waiting on you. There's only one cashier. There's one cashier, right? Then you're selecting what you want. You're paying as you go. That's an example of technology taking over. And I mean, when we talk about something light years ahead of that type of technology, a kiosk, generative AI, there's no choice. But there's also in the same light, I think it's great. It's a good time for people to upskill, right? To learn how to use AI. And essentially, the name of the game is going to be co-piloting. We're turning into a tech world. It has been for years. This is nothing new. So I think it's, you just really need to evolve with technologies. And we're far, far, far away from doctors being replaced and AI really, being
Yeah.
autonomous and stuff like that. So from
Well,
that
the
perspective,
thing that, yeah,
absolutely
doctors
not.
being replaced is a ways away, definitely a ways away. Nurses being replaced is a ways away. But augmenting what physicians
Right.
do with AI and allowing them to do more with less. I mean, I like, this is a bad time to be a radiologist. You don't want to be a radiologist, because that job it ain't
Mm,
going away, but you're going to need one instead of 10. That's a
right. Right.
2026, 2027 certainty, in my opinion. That radiology, if you're a large hospital and you're reviewing images all day long, that's a job that AI is going to largely uh, 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 consume. One other thing is that
And
it's kind
okay.
of fascinating is in almost any major city, the largest single employer is probably a hospital system, right? In any, not in most most cities or towns, I'd be willing to, if they have a hospital, it's probably the largest employer, unless it's a university, maybe. Right. And so if hospitals are able to, trim 10% of their workforce because of AI, and I think that's inevitable. Right. And again, it's not going to be on the clinical side. Perhaps it's going to be but on the clinical side, there's a real shortage of physicians and nurses, and what's going to take the place of that? I did some consulting work for a robot company, and a few years ago, if you said robots in the hospital, you'd think like, come on, that's science fiction. And it's inevitable that you're going to start to see robots doing menial tasks inside of hospitals. But yeah, you go
Banana
do your
bread
banana
break.
bread.
Go ahead.
So I think this whole thing with employers in, in hospital settings, I mean, some of the biggest cities in the, there's certain centers where health tech has been really strong, and those cities have benefited from it. In particular, Boston, Nashville, Rochester, Minnesota, because of Mayo and so forth. And if those guys start to adopt some of these technologies, and they will, it's going to affect those communities. And so that's one thing I think you're going to see more of in 2026. It's just some of that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
My predictions, right? Let's start off with Gen AI. So I think we'll see a lot more consolidation, like you said. There's going to be a huge graveyard. The graveyard is going to be
Yeah.
so overpacked with AI that more can't fit in, if you will. Yeah, especially if you're not building with interoperability and workflows in mind. I don't think there's going to be a lot of adoption for your solutions. That's what clinicians are looking for. So the low risk task that's going to help free up doctors, help free up clinicians, paperwork, administrative work, back office, revenue cycle management. I think there's going to be a huge uptick with that type of AI, those type of AI solutions in the health systems. So that's what my thoughts are as far as Gen AI. Right now, the new buzzword is going to be agentic AI. We're already starting to hear it now, and I think it's really going to start to pop next year. But first, I want to differentiate for everybody, because I feel like the terms AI assistants and agentic AI are sometimes combined. People don't really know the differences. So the AI assistance is essentially like you prompting the AI for something. Think of ChatGPT or Gemini, and it's giving back a response. So the agentic AI is going to be more autonomous, where you give it a task to do, it goes out and does it on its own, and it also controls other agents to complete that task on your behalf with no further interaction after it understands the task from you. Right? Why I don't think that's going to go anywhere anytime soon in healthcare is because you're talking about autonomy, right? Having no humans in the loop performing a task. Healthcare is definitely not ready for that. And we did talk about this already, Brandon, right? Um, it's going to take our jobs, those types of concerns, or is it going to be accurate? Is it going to have hallucinations? So when you really think of agentic AI, that is really, removing the human from the loop and performing things on its own. I hear people in healthcare talking about it now, but I really don't see any adoption for the next, 3 or 5 years in terms of that. And also the risk that goes along with it. Now, we think there's security risks with AI assistance. When you talk about autonomy and agents going out to do things on its own, and if that agent is hacked or what, if you will, and it's not monitoring, it's performing these tasks on its own for days, months on out, and you're not monitoring and you have no idea, the risk with that is really high. And give a quick example is it could be as easy as you have an autonomous agent that's checking your doctor emails and stuff, but if someone sends an email with a prompt in it, and the agent takes that prompt, ingests it, and because it doesn't know it's malicious, and it starts performing malicious tasks on behalf of that because it's going through your email box, right? That's an example of how easy it is to infiltrate and trick the AI agent into performing malicious tasks. And health, care really isn't ready for that. And I would suggest that health tech is to slow down and not really develop AI on that level yet. I don't think the industry is ready. That is, you're talking about true early adopters, and I think you won't get a lot of
If I could,
buy-in from that type of AI
you mentioned
next year
regulatory,
or
right,
within the next few
earlier
years.
on this topic, and to this specific topic. I think one of the things you'll see in the regulatory space is I think you'll see some legislation that'll come out that will say that will enforce the care delivery by people. like that you can't do care delivery by a robot or a
Right.
right, that
Without a
there will
human in the
be
loop.
some being
Right.
passed, and that will happen, and they'll probably start in states like California and New York, maybe Texas, yeah, um, and that will basically say you can't have care delivery specifically just by by some sort of inanimate object or inanimate agent. It'll have to, the care will be delivered by people, and I think it's going to happen.
Right. And I'm glad you Right, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's like a good segue
Yeah,
into my,
yeah.
regulatory predictions for 2026. So, if everybody's not familiar, the feds have essentially they're trying to take the power away from states and put their own AI governance laws in place, and essentially not let the states have any say into this. I don't think it's going to last. To be quite honestly, I think it's going to get struck down, but that's what we're seeing now. Now, if there was a blanket standardized way in terms of govern AI, yes, I do think that's great. But I don't think it's going to happen
There's
in this
no way.
fashion.
With
Right.
current
And goes back
administration,
to
there's no way it's gonna happen. Unless
right. So
unless the Congress changes in the next, but that's a year out, right? Right. Yeah.
R right, right, right. And to your point about the having a human in the loop. Now, Brendan, we should do a podcast on this because a lot of people aren't aware that you're spot on. At the local state level, there are bills introduced, and pre-auths was once I don't remember what state it was, but pre-auths were on the table that they couldn't be, or denials, they couldn't be done just by AIs, AI bots. You had to have a human in the loop. So we're already seeing that. You're right. States introducing bills to that right now. Think which ties into the Fed trying to put the blanket regulations for AI in place. I really think we already know that pissed off the states, and I really think that's going to light the fire to the states to even become more stricter, or you like not more stricter, really focus more on this AI governance piece and taking a look at these bills, of this legislation, and actually getting things put on the table to
Well,
govern it,
there's an
to have better
overwhelming
governance.
uh support for intervention on AI, but from voters. Is
And
whether
it
or
should
not
be, as it should be.
whether or not representative government will do anything about it is that's a different it's a whole different topic, a whole different matter. But there's tremendous pressure, among the voting public to do something about this, because I think you're going to see some big, upheaval in terms of employment, and it's going to have broad impacts. This is independent of the whole, and what is it, AGI guy? General intelligence. Yeah, artificial general
Okay.
intelligence. I think independent of that whole thing, I think you're going to see fundamental changes. And by the way, this is not a rocket science. This is not not earth shattering, but how it plays out is going to be pretty impactful.
Now, something else, one of my positions for 2026 is
Yeah.
remote patient monitoring devices. I think we'll start to see that grow even more. I already think it's a great idea. It's great for patients and it's great for health systems too, especially rural areas, since they're really communities are underserved, and you know it's challenging for patients to get to rural areas and for rural hospitals to actually provide care. So telehealth really helps out with that, helps them reach the wider community, and it helps and make it more efficient. And I think you add RPM on top of that, it's just another layer which helps to deliver care in a more efficient and better way, so that those rural areas communities are able to survive. Again, this is my cybersecurity hat, right? It does open another layer of risk. So health systems are going to need to be, on top of it and ensure that the risks associated with these devices are mitigated. And like telehealth, is also going to involve educating the patient about potential security risks when you talk about remote devices, just like it is with telehealth, because they're doing that now. They have to educate patients on the security risks associated with telehealth. So I think we'll see a spike in the remote patient monitoring devices, and I think this is a great signal for health tech companies to really look into this side of the market and just don't focus on AI, because I think we're going to see a boom.
So telehealth. So just this is independent of AI. You think telehealth is a booming area? Is that what you're saying?
I think telehealth is the booming area, and remote patient monitoring devices. So the devices that
Yeah.
help
Yeah.
augment telehealth and any services that, kind of like
Here
Aresa's diagnostic tool, right? It's essentially a RPM device. So I think there's a great need in the market that there, and I think this is a signal for health tech to
yeah.
focus on other areas and
Well, on the
not
telehealth
just
side of things,
AI.
one of this is the whole going back to the individual states thing and the role that various lobbying organizations and organizations have on healthcare is, you can't, if you're a doctor in Connecticut, you can't practice, you can't do telehealth with a patient that's in Rhode Island.
Right, right,
And you
right.
can throw a rock from states to state, right? So, like you can't have a telehealth organization that covers all 50 states without having docs that can practice medicine in all 50 states. And so there's this whole licensing, you know, hurdle that you've got to go over that's quite ridiculous. And I'm pretty sure that's an AMA lobbying thing that prevents that. And if that got
Yeah.
cleared away, then you could have physicians remotely, delivering healthcare. And by the way, they need to be doing this sort of thing because there's just such a shortage. I finally got a primary care physician. I finally got one. And you know how I did it?
Hmm.
I went concierge. So I paid a bunch of money and now I have a reserved. Yeah.
Direct primary care. It's great. I did it for
Yeah.
about 2 years.
What's that?
DPC is great. Yeah, I said DPC
Yeah,
is
with
great. Direct
concierge
primary
medicine,
care.
right? So you have a dedicated primary care doc you pay for. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
subscription-based model, you pay month to
Yeah.
month. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, man, and so I think we might see some change in I don't know what the current since they're trying to deregulate, we actually might see some changes in telehealth across state borders. I don't know, but yeah, you're absolutely right, and that shift I think it will happen regardless, if not within the next 3 years, within the next decade, I think that's gonna change to really like, for mass, telehealth
So
adoption and to make it
so I
more
got
accessible
I have another
for
thought,
hospitals and
given the
patients.
theme of of this kind of this little chat is, so what do health tech companies do in 2026? And at the risk of sounding self-serving, I think being really effective at sales now is going to be incredibly important because there's so much noise in the marketplace. And so how do you get in front of people and convince people in the health techs, in the, hospitals and health plans and large provider groups and what have you, is how do you get attention and how do you move things forward at a time when I mentioned this Cambrian explosion. The thing about the Cambrian explosion and the thing about this is you're going to see all these new innovations come out. And then a lot of them are going to die off, get traction. And the thing about investors is they will point money to companies that are getting the traction and getting more traction and seeing real acceleration in their momentum. And so there's going to be a tremendous need in 2026 to be really good at executing on your marketing and on your sales to get people to understand what you do and why it's different and why it's important and how to guarantee the success in a world where there's just a tremendous amount of unknowns. And health plans, health systems, they are very hesitant to do anything that has a tremendous amount of risk. So I think there's going to be a tremendous need to be focused on how to mitigate that risk, how to make the pilot, the initial adoption 100% certain of success. And how can you compress that sales process down? How can you get to the right people at the right time as quickly as possible and show how the return on investment and the likelihood of success is just inevitable? I think that's going to be a big thing given the fact that you're in this stage where there's so many people coming at this, so many different solutions that they're getting bombarded by. And they only have so many hours in the day, so many cycles to do this stuff. And so how difficult is that going to be it's going to be difficult for them to decide among all these different choices in the limited amount of time they have and energy. And so I think that's going to be a big thing in this current year and probably ongoing.
So, and this is how I would package it for health tech, piggybacking off what you're talking about, right? I think it starts off with building, and we talked about this with Marcus. I don't think the idea is to build fast. I think it's to build smart. And I say that because I think the health tech companies that are going to win are the ones that actually build something that's a great use case for the clinicians. They really are solving a problem that clinicians need solved. So, building with that in mind, building with workflow in mind, nothing that's going to completely shift their workflows, because that's going to really be a challenge for adoption. So building with workflows in mind, also building with interoperability in mind, meaning that these whatever you're building is easily or can work with EHR systems and the other IT systems within the organization, making that having that cohesive, bringing that cohesive benefit to the clinicians. And also, I think another way to differentiate yourself is to use security as a part of your go to market strategy. This kind of ties into, again, we're seeing vendors rising still within the top three in terms of breaches. I think health systems are becoming very, very aware of that. So I feel like due diligence will increase next year due to those rules. So building security, creating that trust within your packaging and selling is going to really help you stand out. And then, my the final part of this is working with people like you, Brendan, who understand sales, are really going to help you how to everything I just said, communicate those differentiations to the health systems and get in contact with those health systems. And this sea of vendors, people like you will help differentiate yourself and communicate that message, and which will make your product a more likely a success.
Yeah, I think those are important ingredients, and, sort of to wrap things up, I think, what's the old, is it the Chinese curse? "May you live in interesting times." I don't know if the attribution is correct, but I think we're, this is obvious as hell, but, I think we're in for a really interesting ride in 2026 and 2027 and on. This is gonna be, you're gonna see things happen very, very quickly, I think. Oh, and also, I think we
Yeah, and
might
then
see a
last thing,
correction,
yeah.
tremendous amount of money in the marketplace. So one thing we didn't really talk about is, and maybe save this for another day, but what's gonna happen in the event that there's a real correction? Because I think that we are just supercharging this market, and there's just so much cash chasing these companies, and at some point, we're starting to see some really crazy things in terms of how they're investing and these circular investments and so forth. I think we're in for some corrections you may see. I think there's a good chance of some sort of correction in 2026.
Right. And, two more things. I want to talk a little bit about that. So, as far as correction, I really feel like VCs that are going to invest are really going to look for all the aspects that I was talking about. Is your product secure? Is your product interoperable? Does your product complement workflows? They're going to look for those types of things when they invest, because it is the AI craze. They're kind of worn out with it and are coming to the realization that, okay, all of these products aren't going to be adopted within healthcare. So yeah, there will be a correction. I agree as well. And the last point I wanted to talk about was HIPAA. Right. What does that look like in 2026? Well, we saw earlier this year they made some amendments or some suggestions, that a draft to change the HIPAA security rule, which hasn't been changed. I don't know. I know it's been over 10, 15 years since it had an update. We did see that. Then the administration started to change, and it kind of got put on the back burner. So to be quite honest, in 2026, think we might see a draft version 2 of that, but I don't really think it's going to be anywhere near finalized in 2026. Now, even though it's not, everybody still has to adhere, especially health tech. This is for you, right? You still have to adhere to the HIPAA security rules. So this is by no means this is no indication of, relaxing in terms of security. And again, it goes to health systems. I think the due diligence will get stronger, and health systems are being introduced to so many vendors. I think that security is going to or compliance is going to be a differentiator. And I think if you are communicating that you do have compliance, that they're going to dig a little bit deeper than they've been doing to make sure that you actually have robust security controls in place. But I think that's pretty much what we're going to see in terms of HIPAA in 2026. I think we're going to start to see the differentiation between AI governance and AI security is too. I want to mention that as well. Right now, we're seeing security sprinkled in with AI governance, but I think we're going to start to see really the separation. And one of the signals for that is, of course, myself, I'm going to talk about it, but NIST is also working on their draft right now for AI security.